Welcome back to Goosebumpster's Paranormal, subreddit top stories. Today's story has been written by bbabyturnsblue, and the story is called Got Lost in the Woods for 8+ hours as a little girl and saw something unexplainable. I grew up in a densely forested rural area in central Virginia, and like most kids my age, 10 at the time of this story, I spent a lot of time playing in and around the woods. My best friend and I had found a creek one day while exploring different deer trails through the woods. This creek we happened on was a very rare find and the perfect spot for us to play. It was wide and deep enough to swim around in and had nice, soft, mossy banks on either side to rest on after we had tired ourselves out. The water was cool and clear, no copperheads and no mosquitoes because the water was constantly running. We were psyched. After a few hours of swimming, we had to walk back home for lunch, but made plans to pack lunch the next day so we could have a picnic on the creek banks and spend the whole day there. The next morning, we set out for the woods at around 1 p.m., planning to have the picnic first and swim after. We entered at the same spot we had the previous day and followed what we thought was the same deer trail. It was not. At the point where we should have found the creek, we walked into a small clearing that was covered in huge, thick ferns. We had definitely never walked past this before, so, being both hungry and tired of walking, we decided to eat in the clearing. We laughed and played around there for a while, spitting watermelon seeds at each other from our lunch. It was an absolute blast, and we were both in wonderful, giddy. That all changed, however, as soon as we packed up and set back out to find the creek. As we walked on, the woods started to feel darker and colder. We got skittish and I noticed my friend kept whipping her head around to look behind us. After about an hour of walking, we came up on what looked like an entire overgrown bathroom, sink, toilet, and bathtub, all sitting arranged together and covered in ivy. It's pretty common to find weird shit like this in the middle of the woods. So we just walked on and made jokes to lighten the mood, calling it Bigfoot's bathroom. After another hour of walking and not seeing anything we recognized, we started to panic. Instead of trying to reach the creek, we were now just trying to find our way back home out of the woods, at least. I told her we should follow the sun, and eventually we would come up on a road or someone's property where we could find help. She insisted on another way, and we began yelling at each other out of fear and, let's be honest, little girl bossiness. I told her if she thought she was so right, she should just go her way and we would see who got out first. So we split up. Now as an adult, I fully acknowledged I was being a stubborn brat and also an idiot. Worst possible thing we could have done. Not 10 minutes after splitting up, I began to hear someone walking maybe 100 feet behind me. Thinking it was my friend, deciding to go my way after all, I slowed down so she can catch up to me. Instead, whatever it was matched my pace. I slowed down, it slowed down. I stopped, it stops. This went on for hours. The whole time I was going back and forth on whether or not it was in my head or there was really something following me. I picked up a big stick, swung it a few times to make sure it was sturdy if I had to hit someone, and trucked on. As it began to get dark, I came up on something that made my heart sink into my stomach. It was Bigfoot's bathroom. I had just walked in a huge circle for hours, despite being 100% sure I was following the setting sun west the entire time. Confused and frustrated, I sat down on a log and just screamed my little heart out while smacking my whoop-ass stick repeatedly into the ground. As I tried to collect myself, I heard the footsteps again walking up on me from behind. I called out my friend's name as loud as I could. No answer. Then, after a short pause, the steps began to run towards me. I jumped up and booked it as fast as I could in the opposite direction. Now, this is the truly horrifying part, which I typically omit while telling people this story. As I was sprinting through the darkening woods, I began to hear what I thought were church bells. I looked up to see the darkest, deepest cloud I've ever seen in my life. In the middle, it was so black it was looking into the night sky, and the dark gray around it seemed to be swirling. It gave me a horrible feeling to look at, almost like the nausea you get when looking through binoculars too long. What sickened me further is that I realized the sound of the bells was coming through the hole in the cloud. They were deafeningly loud. I mean, really booming out of this thing. When I realized this, I stopped dead in my tracks. I felt the sense of absolute and overwhelming dread that has gone unmatched in all my 24 years on this planet. Something in my head began screaming that if I did not run away from whatever the hell that cloud was, no one would ever see me again. I would be gone. I did not want to run toward the thing chasing behind me either, though, so I made a sharp right and took off away from both. It was completely dark, and I was running blind through the woods, smacking through branches, whizzing and tripping every few feet for what seemed like another hour, until I smacked into something low and flew over it, hitting the ground so hard, all the air in my lungs was knocked out of me. As I lay there trying to recover, I realized I couldn't hear the bells anymore. Then my eyes adjusted more to the dark, and I realized what had just made me go ass over teeth was an old fence. Grabbing hold of it, I prayed it would lead me to a farm, and sure enough it did. I walked up over a hill about a mile to the back of the farmhouse, explained what had happened, and the farmer graciously gave me a ride back home. I was covered head to toe in scrapes oozing blood, and more exhausted than I had ever been in my life. But I was finally safe. My friend had gotten back shortly after we split and figured I had as well. So hadn't told anybody I was lost, and my family just figured I was still out after dark, which wasn't uncommon for me. They were shocked when I walked in beat up and crying. Nobody had been looking for me at all. To this day, I wonder how long would they have waited to find me if I hadn't been lucky enough to find the fence, and if it would have been too late. Our next story has been written by OGCeeg, and the story is called I Saw Something on My Way Home from Work That Scared Me Half to Death. I've posted in here before, and I don't know if this story is allowed because it's not a ghostly experience or a haunted house, but I have zero explanation for the event. Before I tell you my story, I'm going to give you some context about my drive home from work, the state I live in, and such. This happened about 10 minutes after I left work today, July 4th, 2020. I live in Northeast Ohio, and I got a job about 2 months ago as a process technician at a dairy plant. It pays very good money, considering it's a 35 mile drive one way. After about 20 or 25 miles, I drive through a wooded area. Nothing uncommon for me, as where I live in Northeast Ohio, forests are common. And I pretty much lived in one behind my grandma's house growing up. I worked 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., and the drive home sucks, whether it's being tired, hungry, or the fog, almost every night. I go the same way every day and night. I was driving my way home. I just left the residential area of my workplace and was going through the forested area. As I said, there's almost fog every night, so I'm on high alert for deer, raccoons, and such critters. It's just like every other drive home so far. I have a podcast on, focusing on the road, thinking of getting either a sausage McMuffin or a McGriddle from McDonald's. and sometimes looking off to the side of the road for any eyes reflecting off my headlights. All of a sudden, I see some reflecting eyes. Out of the woods comes a coyote. In my hometown, coyotes aren't too rare. I've seen them by my high school, but had never seen one outside of my hometown, so it surprised me. I start slowing down as it crosses the road until it turns to my car and sits in the road. It sat about 10 feet from my car. There had been no cars I had seen since leaving the residential area, so I was going to go around it. But I thought this was too odd of a thing to happen to just drive away from it. I expected it to just get up and walk away at any given second. This is where I began to get very scared. I honked my horn, and after about 2 or 3 seconds, it smiles at me. I have my brights on, so I can see it perfectly. This coyote had human-shaped teeth. My heart dropped and every hair on my body raised, just as it is now, recalling this incident. It lasted about 1 second before sitting up and running into the woods. I sat there in fear for about 5 seconds before shoving my foot on the pedal and driving at getaway speed. I didn't stop and get food because I had and still have no appetite. I thought the rest of the ride home what I saw. Once doubting I saw it. But like I said, with my brights on, and it was as close to my car as it was, I saw it as clear as day. This coyote had human teeth, and there was no doubt about it. I'm very into the paranormal, and that includes cryptids. Is it possible I ran into a skinwalker or some genetically mutated coyote? I am Native American, if that counts for anything. It's so weird typing this out, but I'd like someone who knew more about these things to help out if they can. I know one thing though, and that's I'm finding a new way to work. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to check out more of the author's content on their Reddit page and show your support. Links are in the description. Turborize the like button and subscribe for more Reddit's top scariest stories if you dare. I'll see you soon.